said, you got the cheerleaders, you go to school, and that's the most popular thing to do. Like I said, you got to find boxing gyms. They're hiding behind 7-Eleven, holes in the walls, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and go to the next question. Now, like I said, you are the president of the Boxing Hall of Fame, Las Vegas. How did that project come together?
I worked at a company called Big Fights. The company owned all of the fight films in the world, the films of Ali, Joe Louis, Jack Dempsey, Rocky Marciano, and my job was editing the films for almost 25 years. During that period, the owners of the company were always interested in building a Boxing Hall of Fame, having the exclusive rights to the films, a library of memorabilia with the gloves, the trunks, photographs, art. They thought it would be a wonderful thing to have. So that was a desire for the owners, and then it became a desire for me as well. As the company grew and it got older, eventually it was sold to ESPN in 1998. And as part of the deal, we retained the rights to use the films in a Boxing Hall of Fame or boxing museum. While ESPN bought the company for $73 million, they wanted all the rights. But my boss, as he had promised me, said, Steve, we're going to keep out of the deal the rights for the Boxing Hall of Fame so that you and I, or you, can build one eventually. I said, terrific, thank you very much. ESPN wasn't thrilled about that because they wanted everything, but the fight films at that time were being shown on Classic Sports Network. And when ESPN bought Big Fights and all the fight films, they reviewed the ratings of the fights that were playing on Classic Sports. They had just purchased Classic Sports as well. And when they looked at the ratings of the fights of Ali or Lewis or Robinson, they saw that the ratings of those fights on Classic Sports were higher than the live fights on ESPN. So they knew that whatever they had to do, they had to protect that rights in the Classic Sports library that they bought for $100 million. So they bought the Big Fights library, but we kept those rights for the Hall of Fame. It took years, but I knew eventually we'd get a space somewhere. Getting a space in Vegas is very tough to get at a casino. You know, the rents in the retail shops are enormous. Casino space is impossible. So we got very lucky. There was a developer who had a terrific space at the Luxor Hotel. And his concept was to build a multi-sports Hall of Fame attraction. He was able to make deals, I don't know how he was able to do it, with the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Football Hall of Fame, Hockey Hall of Fame, NASCAR, basketball. And when he heard that we had the exclusive rights to the films and tapes, he said, I've got to put a Boxing Hall of Fame in here as well. So every sport has a small area. It's just wonderful to have the boxing next to baseball and football. So when people go through and they see Willie Mays, or they see Mickey Mantle, or they see Wilt Chamberlain in the basketball, or Jimmy Brown, or Joe Namath in the football, when they get into the boxing, they're pretty impressed. They see Jack Dempsey and Joe Louis and Robinson, of course Tyson and Ali. So it's nice to have that level of greatness of baseball and football right next to boxing. I want people to remember that these athletes were incredible. They were the superstars of the last 100 years. As an aside, it's interesting that Muhammad Ali was voted the athlete of the century from 1900 to 2000 by most publications and most organizations. What's little known is that the athlete of the century unanimously for the 1800s was a heavyweight champion named John L. Sullivan. And that means that for the last 2 centuries, the athlete of the century has been a boxer. Now, I don't know if it happened this century, but that's how great these guys were. And it's just wonderful to be right next to baseball, football, basketball here in Las Vegas.
Absolutely. Well, one thing we can say for the sport of boxing is Floyd Mayweather, he's been the highest paid athlete in the last 3 years, so that kind of represents the sport of boxing as well. We're not as popular as we were before, but speaking of how popular we are, in contrast, you know how people say the sport is dying. In contrast to the other Hall of Fame, baseball, basketball, how successful is the Boxing Hall of Fame in contrast to the other sports?
Well, fortunately, we're in Las Vegas. But the other sports have a huge following. You know, they showed during the Super Bowl the traffic flow to the amount of viewers on TV for the various sports, and football and baseball were way on top of the list. Then they came basketball and hockey, and boxing was further down. Fortunately for boxing, while it's not mainstream with the white audience, or relatively mainstream even with the black audience, it's huge in the Latino audience. Probably baseball and boxing are the number 1 and 2 sports. That's why perhaps every fight you see on classics on ESPN or HBO or Showtime or Fox is 2 Hispanic fighters, or at least 1 Hispanic fighter in the bout. And that audience is huge, and it's getting bigger. So while boxing may not be as popular in the mainstream, it's going to stay in pretty good stead with the Latino audience. And as long as there are kids coming up, they're going to be somewhat exciting. The Latino audience is very, very loyal to boxing, and that's going to stay like that. Fortunately, there's a fighter like Mayweather. I'm an old guy, and I have seen a lot of fights, especially on film, and all I can say is that Mayweather is a great fighter, and he's a champion. But today there's no Roberto Duran around, and there's no Aaron Pryor, and there's no Marvin Hagler, there's no Tommy Hearns. If they were around today, the pay-per-view numbers would be astronomical. So it is a different era. Even Tyson, when I was working with him back in the 80s, there was no pay-per-view when he was fighting. It was on HBO. So the level of fighters, they're great, they're wonderful, but the guys back then were killers, man, killers. So, but boxing could stay in good stead with the Latino audience. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and go to my next question. So I want to talk about Mike Tyson. When did you first start working with Mike Tyson, and when did you meet him?
The company I was working with, Big Fights, while it owned all the fight films in the world, the owners, Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton, had a dear friend in Customato. And Customato had a training camp in upstate New York in Catskill, and they were funding it for many years. While they were doing that, they got involved with managing fighters. The first one was a fighter, terrific welterweight named Wilfred Benitez. And once they got involved with him, it became interesting. It became exciting. While owning all the fight films, Ali and Lewis and Dempsey were terrific, having a live fighter is a lot of fun. And so my job was to handle the fighters on the road. After a contract was signed with Motor by Bill Caton and Jim Jacobs, they said, Steve, we signed for Wilfred Benitez to fight in Las Vegas against Carlos Santos. He needs the sparring, he needs the training, he needs the flights, he needs the medicals, he needs all of the licenses. There you go. My job was to handle that on the road. That was great practice, because after that we had a fighter named Edwin Rosario, and he was lightweight champion. And during that time period, in 1980, Cus D'Amato would call Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton every once in a while and say, I got a kid, he's going to be really good. And they probably said, fine, Cus, let us know. And they'd send them more money for food and rent and whatever they needed. And that would happen year after year, and nothing really transpired. But in 1980, Cus called and said, I got a kid, he's going to be pretty good. His name is Mike Tyson. And they probably said, terrific, Cus, let us know what happens. No one on the planet thought Mike would be anything. No one. For year after year. Even when Mike was a spectacular amateur, they thought he was too small, he didn't jab, he didn't win the Olympic trials, he turned pro. And that's when I started to hang a bit with him, because once he turned pro, between each fight he'd have a day off, and Cus would permit him to come to the city to take a day off. And Cus asked me if it's okay if Mike stayed in my apartment with me. I said, no problem. And he became my friend, Mike Tyson. No one in the press, no one in the sporting world, no one in the boxing world said this kid's going to be anything. Cus, having that vision, knew that if Mike continued on, he could be another Jack Dempsey, another Joe Louis. But you have to have that inner vision to see that. And even me, I'd come out of the bedroom in the morning, and there on the couch is my buddy Mike Tyson, a 4-round fighter. He's cool. He's a terrific kid, great friend. And my job was to handle him on the road with all the logistics of the training and the sparring and licenses. But as the months went by, I'd come out of my bedroom, and I'd go and see Mike on the couch, and he was a 4-round fighter, then a 6-round fighter, an 8-round fighter, 10-round fighter. And then one day I came out of my bedroom, and there on the couch is the heavyweight champion of the world. That was cool. And not only the heavyweight champ, but an explosive knockout punching sensation, you know. And I would look at him and say, I know he's heavyweight champ, but he's my buddy, you know. It's like having Willie Mays or Michael Jordan or Mickey Mantle sleeping on your couch, you know. And the lowest, most, you know, unassuming guy. He would no braggadocio. That was wonderful, hanging with him and training with him and watching him. That was the ring stuff. That was the stuff that he was supposed to do as a boxer. But what really was more important to everyone around him, Cuss and Caton, Jacobs, me, was what Mike did out of the ring. Because that really was something that was very important to Cuss, to see how Mike handled himself out of the ring and what he accomplished out of the ring. And actually, what he accomplished out of the ring was more important and more interesting and more dazzling than what he did in the ring. In 86, 87, he was hired to do commercials on television for Pepsi Cola, Nintendo Video, Kodak Film, Suntory Beer. He was hired by the New York City Police Department to be their spokesperson. Posters all over New York City with a big shot of Mike Tyson saying it's more important to be a cop. Cops are better than I am, you know. It's an incredible campaign. He was a spokesperson for the FBI and the DEA. They did a PSA, a public service announcement to keep kids off drugs. This is Mike Tyson. I'm telling you kids to stay off drugs. That was more important, and Mike loved that. I mean, you know, who wouldn't want to be a hero? So all of that stuff made it a wonderful time.
And a lot of people, and it's a good thing you said that, because a lot of people don't know that about Mike Tyson. But also, he was the most popular person at that time in the 80s as well, right? What was it?
Well, Mike was, of course, very popular celebrity. In 1987, the European Associated Press voted on who was the most popular athlete in the world. And it was a tie between Mike and this legendary soccer player, Diego Maradona.
Wow.
Who around the world, soccer at that time may have been as big or bigger than boxing worldwide. Number 3 on the list might have been Ivan Lendl, tennis player. Number 4 might have been Martina Navratilova. Baseball, football, basketball players weren't even on the list. Mm-hmm. That's how big Mike was worldwide. And worldwide, the following year was interesting. In 1988, this incredible stadium opened up in Tokyo, the Kyorakurum Dome. It was called the Big Egg. And they wanted to put on an event that would show the entire world they exist, they're open for business, they want clients, they want acts there. So they decided, who can we put in here for the very first big performance that would be worldwide, that would draw attention to us? And they had a choice. They had a choice: Madonna, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, Billy Joel, Rolling Stones, or Mike Tyson. And they went with Mike Tyson.
Really?
Because they knew that world, while, you know, the musical world, they'd get a lot of kids and people, music, but the boxing was so once in a lifetime heavyweight championship. It happened so rare. So we went there. It was a wonderful time, and to open the arena, the Kyorakurum Dome, that was terrific. The Big Egg, and Mike was there. Very first show. It was terrific. You know?
Wow, that's impressive. Well, that's all the good stuff about Mike Tyson. Now I want to ask you, when was the beginning? When did it all start to spiral out of control and start to go downhill? When did it first start? When you first started to sense things going bad?
It's interesting that in Mike's career, there were 2 camps. There were 2 different eras, so to speak. When he was with Customado and Jacobs and Caton, everything around Mike at that time was positive. Every piece of information that was given to him was with one thought and one thought only: what's best for Mike? Not what's best for me or the managers or the press. What's best for Mike? And when Mike was given information and he was told, if you say this or you do this, this will be in your best interest, he always did it. Even if he didn't want to do it, he did it. The result was what I just mentioned: hero, commercials on TV, spokesperson for the FBI, the DEA, New York City Police Department. Now, a common misconception is that Mike, on his own, slowly started to spiral. that either he